You take one last glance at your warped reflection in the glossy exterior of the limousine and brush rebellious locks of hair back into place. You suppress the urge to turn and run from the party and its many sets of piercing eyes. With a deep breath and a long exhale, you turn towards the absolutely daunting house. You walk through the looming doors and grudgingly make your way to the heart of the affair. Your heart pounds as you exit the back door and look over the populated garden, and brace yourself for the burning gaze of the crowd. Not a single person turns their head. Nobody even notices your arrival. You reassess the scene and an idea slams into you. You could lose yourself in this fast-moving life of the East Coast partygoers. You can dive into the commotion and hide in its eccentric parties and social intricacies. You would be hiding in a plain sight, free from the blazing scrutiny of intellectual men who find thrill in attacking a person's history. Following a quick moment to ground yourself, you continue to approach the party, but with a businesslike mindset, you jump slightly as Nick Carraway loudly shouts,
"Hello!"
from across the lawn. You accept his welcome and meet him on the immaculately cut grass. The night progresses, and you follow the ebb and flow of the party as you bounce from room to room and group to group, trying to make an impression akin to the one expected of a gracious host. You are practically in Gatsby's shoes. After a few hours of this, you again find yourself sitting at a table with Nick, passively participating in a meaningless conversation, when Gatsby coolly struts up and addresses Nick. What? Gatsby's approaching Nick, of all people? He probably won't even appreciate the gravity of this moment. The two men converse, and you spend the entire time fixing your gaze upon Gatsby. The captivating way he talks, the way he can answer a question with nothing but a smile, the way he constantly seems to be painting an image of himself that could be miles from reality. You think back to all the times you have seen him that night, standing on his ornate balcony, smiling at the guests below as if he loves them all. Hundreds of admiring eyes fell upon him, yet none truly knew him. He is the master of hiding in plain sight, yet still manages to keep up a dazzling persona. After working his magic on Nick, Gatsby rises and leaves the table in order to momentarily engage in pretend deep conversation with other guests. Bewildered, Nick turns to you and asks who he is. You decide to add to Gatsby's ambiguity and respond,
Him? Oh, that's the great Gatsby himself.
Nick, clearly unsatisfied with your lack of detail, asks,
"Where is he from, and what does he do?"
You smirk and secretly marvel at Gatsby's ability to incite confusion and awe in his guests with a single interaction. You decide to share a small bit of history Gatsby once told you. You assume the hushed tone of a storyteller and state,
Well, he told me once he was an Oxford man.
You let the statement settle in with Nick, briefly allowing him to feel as though he's beginning to understand Gatsby, before confusing him further by claiming,
However, I don't believe it.
You really don't. You believe that Gatsby releases little bits of information to build a vague background and keep people from reaching too far with their speculation. Not enough information, however. You recall the rumors you have heard of him, killing men or obtaining dirty money. These rumors will catch up to him sometime. You silently resolve to methodically maintain a spotless reputation, should you rise to fame similar to Gatsby. You lose interest in discussing Gatsby's past and bluntly state,
Anyhow, he gives large parties. And large parties offer an alternate world, much different than small parties, which absolutely lack privacy.
Your own statement resonates with you. This is your ideal lifestyle. You can be adored by all, yet not have to sacrifice your tender personal life. You resolve to work your way into this utopian world. The sound of deep bass and playful trumpets ripples through your ears, drowning out the chatter around you. It's your favorite jazz piece, and you have become so enamored with it, it makes you lose your senses as you listen, carrying you away into a world you crave and yet know nothing about. Jazz history of the world slowly comes to a long, pitiful end as you briskly regain yourself to the surprise of a swift, gloved hand touching your left shoulder.
I beg your pardon.
Gatsby's butler is suddenly standing behind you and Nick.
Miss Baker,
He inquires.
I beg your pardon, but Mr. Gatsby would like to speak to you alone.
The alone resonates with you, almost as much as the jazz arrangement once did.
With me?
You exclaim in surprise, attempting to hide your excitement.
Yes, madam.
Quite slowly, you rise from your chair, leaving Nick to meet the butler. You glance at Nick, checking for his endorsement as you parade your peacock wings and jauntily walk across the lawn towards Gatsby's study. Your heart is racing, but only a fool would be keen enough to notice. You reach for the handle on the door to the study, but Gatsby quickly opens the door from the other side. He greets you with a charming smile that seemingly eases your nerves. He seems softer behind closed doors, as if he feels the need to retreat from his own festivities every once in a while, in order to regain his exuberant self in the public eye. How lonely, you think to yourself.
Having a good time there, Jordan, I do hope?
Why, yes, of course. We just absolutely love these parties you throw, Gatsby. The intimacy is...
Here, listen now, Jordan. I have some very important matters to discuss with you.
He is but a piece of candy, Gatsby. So sweet it makes your stomach warm as you eat it. but if you are not careful, it can rot your teeth away. But the temptation to indulge in Gatsby's life is all too great for you to not consider reconciling your fine pearly whites for Gatsby.
Do tell me, Gatsby.
Jordan, you know best that Daisy is the love of my life.
There was a general consensus between you both. You both had something the other craved. It was a symbiosis. Gatsby had eyes only for Daisy, while you had eyes only for a life across the bay. How lucky Daisy must be to have a man do all this for her. You look at him and notice his endearing eyes. Clearly his empty heart was broken. Playing on this, you make it clear to him that what he is asking of you is complex and requires much effort, though in your truest self you know it would take but a mere sentence or two of convincing. But you can tell he truly loves Daisy beyond himself. You too crave a man to speak of you in this way, but quickly undermine these feelings and recenter yourself. This is your opportunity to play an important role, and you fully take advantage of poor Gatsby.
Gatsby, I can help you set this up and prove to Daisy your true love. Don't you think?
What once was a small moment of hope glistened in Gatsby's eyes. It disappears into the wild lights and half-empty champagne glasses as he opens the doors from his study to his life. You leave the conversation sick on the sugar Gatsby is feeding you. However, not a care in the world could stop you from pursuing this endeavor, to help Daisy and Gatsby be together, absolutely. The following morning, you begin telling your story to Nick at the plaza. It is a sunny day in October 1917 when you decide to take a walk along the elegant and grand houses that you are much too familiar with. Sun masks your skin as you are hopeful for what the day will bring. You are half walking on the lawns and half on the sidewalk, happy because your feet sink into the soft ground of the lawns. You are wearing a new skirt that you just bought, which nicely complements your fashionable shoes that scream, "Look at me!" Your skirt flies up in the wind, and the American flags that line the rich houses seem to move in a disapproving way. You come across the wealthiest house of them all, Daisy Faye's house. Oh, Daisy, the most beautiful girl in town. You are only 2 years younger than Daisy, and yet Daisy is everything you have ever wanted to be. She is the most popular girl in all of Louisville, and absolutely the most desired. Whenever you see Daisy, she is dressed in white, and you know her telephone is always ringing because the young officers from Camp Taylor are always extending their wanting arms in hopes to win her over. They always say, "Anyways, for an hour?" when she actually picks up the phone. "When are you free?" they say, desperate for her time. Oh, how you wish you were her. You wonder what it is like to get so much attention. That morning, as you walk past her house, you see her in her white car with someone, a lieutenant who is unfamiliar to you. You wonder who is the lucky boy as you walk closer and closer. They do not seem to notice you until you are about 5 feet away because they are so captivated by each other. Once she finally notices you, she calls to you saying,
Hello, Jordan.
catching you off guard.
Please come here.
She says, "You admire Daisy so much and you are honored she wants to talk to you, of all people." Daisy starts to make conversation by asking you if you are going to the Red Cross to make bandages. You respond with a polite,
Yes.
in your most elegant voice to impress her. Whilst talking to Daisy, you cannot help but notice the way the young man next to her is looking at her, who later you will learn is named Jay Gatsby. You examine his face out of the corner of your eye, and you notice the romantic desire as he gazes upon Daisy. Oh my, the look he is giving her. The way in which every girl wants to be looked at. You realize Gatsby really loves her and sees the beauty in her. You want to be the center of somebody's universe, the way that Daisy is the center of Gatsby's. One day, you tell yourself, one day. You realize you will forever hold the memory of this day engraved in your brain, that you will never forget it because it is everything you've ever dreamed of. For a second, you snap out of storytelling, and you remember that Gatsby will never be able to fully monopolize Daisy because she is now married to Tom Buchanan. And even though their marriage is not perfect, it works because they have a special bond. You remember back to the incident you were describing to Nick, and you feel sad for Gatsby because he is blinded by his love for Daisy, and you know he will never move on even if Daisy has. You finish telling Nick everything, and you leave the plaza with him for half an hour and drive in an old-school Victoria car through Central Park. The sun was now down behind the tall apartments of the movie stars in the West 50s, and the clear voices of girls, already gathered like crickets on grass, rose to the hot twilight. You say that Gatsby bought the house that he did just so that Daisy could be across the bay. Nick then thinks about the time he saw Gatsby admiring the stars on a June night. You then listen as Nick tells you that
It had not been merely the stars to which he had found aspired on that June night.
you tell Nick,
Gatsby wants to know if you will invite Daisy to your house some afternoon and then let him come over.
the demand shook Nick because
He has waited 5 years and bought a mansion where he dispensed starlight to casual moths so that he could come over some afternoon to a stranger's garden.
you had talked to Gatsby and he was afraid to ask Nick because he was afraid he would offend Nick. You asked Nick for Gatsby because it is the right thing to do. Gatsby then asks you to ask Nick if he will arrange a meeting with Daisy because he wants for Daisy to admire his house. You ask Nick because he has the perfect house to invite Daisy to because he is the neighbor of Gatsby. You know that Gatsby partially expected Daisy to somehow end up in one of his big parties. That never seemed to be the case with Daisy. You remember that it was that night that Gatsby sent for you at his dance that he casually began asking people if they knew Daisy until he ran into you. In the past, you suggested for Gatsby to have a luncheon in New York with Daisy, but Gatsby gets angry with your idea, saying,
I don't want to do anything out of the way.
You understand that he did not want to do anything far away from Daisy because he was so attached to Daisy that he wanted to see her right next door to him every day. You know that Gatsby is desperate to see Daisy again. You tell Gatsby that Nick is a friend of Tom and he did not want to get in the middle of everything. You know that Gatsby knows very little about Tom, but what he told you, he has read a Chicago paper for years just on the chance of catching a glimpse of Daisy's name. You sit there in Nick's car under a bridge as he puts his arm around you as you become closer with him, followed by him asking you to dinner. You are thinking about you and Nick's relationship and say to him,
Daisy ought to have something in her life.
You tell him that Daisy cannot know about anything. He must only invite Daisy over to his house for tea. You sit there as he loves upon you, drawing you tighter into his arms. You smile and are filled with love and happiness as he draws you closer and closer to his face until you kiss the chapter away.